Hey there, folks. Settle in, grab a coffee, or maybe something stronger. Because tonight I'm going to take you back to a time when the wind carried more than just dust. It carried the weight of choices, the kind that could break a man or make him whole again. This is a story about Jed Harper, a lone rancher in the heart of the Wild West, and a girl named Nantan, whose silence screamed louder than any gunshot. It's a story about justice, the kind you don't find in a badge or a courtroom, but in the dirt and blood of standing up when the world tells you to stay quiet. Let's ride into Cold Pine, a town where the law was bought and paid for, and see what happens when one man decides silence ain't an option anymore. Picture this, a valley carved out of stone and sorrow, where the wind cuts like a knife and the sun don't forgive. Cold Pine, Arizona, 1870s. A speck of a town, barely clinging to life, where the cottonwood tree in the square ain't just a landmark, it's a gallows. Jed Harper's been living on the edge of this place for 8 years, alone except for his horses and the endless howl of the wind. He's a man who buried his heart when he buried his wife. A man who learned to speak less and listen more. But one day, that wind carried something new, the creak of a rope and the murmur of a crowd. Jed was hauling oats to his wagon when he saw her, a young Apache woman, no more than 20, strung up on that cursed cottonwood. Her deerskin dress swayed in the breeze, her feet twitching. Not the limp dangle of the dead, but the desperate kick of someone still fighting to breathe. The men tightening the noose were deputy stores, their badges glinting like lies in the sun. And the preacher, the one muttering prayers over her, had blood on his knuckles, fresh as the dust under their boots. This wasn't justice. This was a message, a warning to anyone who didn't bow to Cold Pine's new law, Sheriff Brackett's law, bought by the highest bidder. I don't know about you, but I've had moments where the world feels wrong, like the ground itself is tilting under your feet. Maybe you've stood there, frozen, knowing you should do something but not sure what. For Jed, that moment hit like a bullet. He dropped the sack of oats, his hand drifting to the knife at his belt. Muscle memory, not thought. He saw his wife's face and that girl's cheekbones, and the way she didn't scream, didn't beg. Her eyes stayed open, unblinking through the noose, like she was daring the world to look back. The crowd shuffled, boots scuffing dirt, but no one moved to help. Cold Pine had made its choice long ago. Shutters bolted, lamps snuffed out, silence stretched thin as a coffin lid. Jed could have walked away. 8 years of solitude taught him how to keep his head down. But something in her gaze, that unspoken defiance, broke through the walls he'd built. Maybe you felt it too, a moment when you realize staying quiet costs more than speaking up. For Jed, that moment was now. That night, he didn't sleep. The girl's face haunted the dark. Not her beauty, but the strength carved into her bones. He lay on his cot above the stable, boots still on, staring at the ceiling beams. Moonlight slipped through the cracks, painting the world silver. His rifle stayed on the wall. Tonight, he needed a blade, not a bullet. He moved quick, down the slope, past the dry creek bed and the leaning church, to the cottonwood tree. No guards, no torches, just her, swaying like she'd become part of the night itself. One clean slice, and the rope gave way. She fell into his arms, light as a whisper, her breath ragged but stubborn. Her skin was cold, her dress torn where the rope had bitten into her neck. Her wrists were bound too, and he cut those free, careful not to hurt her more. She didn't speak, didn't even open her eyes, but her chest rose and fell, faint as a promise. Jed carried her out of Cold Pine, past the town that had turned its back on her. By the time he reached his cabin, the eastern ridge glowed with the faint orange of false dawn. He laid her on his cot, pulled a wool blanket over her, and lit the stove. The fire crackled soft, and for the first time in years, his cabin didn't feel so empty. As the light grew, he studied her. Bruises on her neck, blood at her temple, dirt ground into her skin. But beneath it all, a stillness forged in fire, not fear. He touched the scar on her palm, old, deep, deliberate, the survivor's mark. She wasn't new to ropes or pain, he reckoned. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. 8 years alone, and now this stranger was breathing his air, lying in his bed. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew one thing. The men who hung her weren't done, and neither was she. The fire was dying when she stirred. Jed had dozed in the rocking chair, rifle across his lap. The creak of the cot woke him. She was sitting up, barely, blinking at the shadows like she didn't trust him. Her lips moved, cracked and dry, before a whisper slipped out. "Where am I?" "My land," Jed said, voice low and steady. "My cabin, 6 miles north of Cold Pine." She blinked slow. "They hung me." "They tried." Silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. She pulled the blanket tighter, like she was testing if safety was real. "My name's Nantan. It means spirit talker." Jed nodded once. "Jed Harper." Her eyes narrowed, sizing him up. "You ain't army, but you cut me down." "Seemed like the right thing to do." That earned a faint smile, not warm, but like someone remembering what warmth felt like. She looked at her wrists, bruised and raw. "They said I stole a horse, that I was trouble." Jed leaned forward, voice gravelly. "Did you?" She didn't answer, just stared at the fire like it held a truth she wasn't ready to share. He didn't push. Some stories need time to bleed out. Instead, he handed her a tin cup of water. She drank slow, hands trembling just once before stilling. Outside, the wind shifted, clouds thinning under a sky that promised nothing. "They'll come looking," she said, not a question. "Yeah," Jed replied. "And if they find you here, they won't forgive you for it." She looked at him then, really looked, like she was measuring the weight of his scars. Whatever she saw, it was enough. She nodded, short and sharp. Jed stoked the fire, then stepped to the door, scanning the horizon. Empty, for now. But he could feel it, the wrongness in the air. Towns like Cold Pine didn't hang girls without a plan. By first light, the buzzards were circling, black shapes gliding slow over the south ridge. In these parts, that meant one thing: something had died, or was about to. Jed stood on his porch, coffee in hand, shotgun propped by the door. The wind carried dust and the faint rhythm of hooves. Behind him, the floor creaked. Nantan stood at the threshold, blanket around her shoulders, eyes sharp despite the bruises. She didn't ask what he saw. She knew. "Company," Jed said. 3, maybe 4, moving slow, like they're not sure what they'll find. She stepped beside him, face unreadable. "They'll burn your place down just to prove a point." Jed sipped his coffee. "Let 'em try." The horses appeared, dust-coated, ridden by men with guns low and mouths tight. Sheriff Brackett led them, his badge as worn as his conscience. He pulled up short of the fence, tipping his hat. "Mornin', Harper." Jed didn't answer. "Heard there was trouble last night," Brackett said, eyes scanning the cabin. "Girl went missing from town. You wouldn't have seen anything strange out this way, would you?" "Plenty strange out here, Sheriff," Jed said. "Coyotes howling like ghosts, buzzards flying lazy, but no girl." Brackett's smile was thin, his eyes colder. "Funny, some folks swear they saw tracks leading this way. Bare feet, small prints, fresh." "I'm not a tracker, Sheriff," Jed said slow. "I deal in fence posts and horses." Brackett's smile faded. "Just so we're clear, Harper, harboring a fugitive makes you an accessory, even if she's Apache. Especially if she's Apache." "You done?" Jed asked.
Brackett chewed on that, then reined his horse around. For now. They rode off, but Jed knew they'd be back, with more men, with fire. He turned to Nantan. She didn't look scared, just ready. "They're coming," he said. "Let them," she replied. And in that moment, Jed understood what kind of fight this was. Not about guilt or innocence, not even about survival. It was about refusal, refusing to vanish, refusing to bow. Two ghosts of a broken world standing side by side on land that had forgotten mercy. That night, the wind turned hot and dry, whispering of matches and revenge. Jed was checking lantern oil by the barn when he caught a glint on the ridge. Glass, a scope. "Watchers," he said aloud. Nantan was already there, her knife gleaming in the dusk. "They'll wait till dark," she said. "Then they'll come with fire." Jed nodded. From the edge of the barn, he looked at his cabin. Weather-beaten, sturdy, built by hand to outrun grief. Now it might burn in a night. He turned to her. "If you go now, follow the creek west. You might get a half-day's head start." She didn't answer. Her voice, when it came, was calm. "You don't owe me, but here we are." They went quiet. As dusk fell, Jed opened a trap door in the barn floor. Inside, sacks of powder, coils, wire, iron devices wrapped in burlap, relics from the rail wars when he'd blasted through mountains and men alike. He hadn't touched them in years. "You built this place like a fortress," Nantan said, crouching beside him. "No," Jed replied. "I built it like a tomb. I just didn't know it." They worked in silence, laying traps, setting fuses. The barn was wired to light up the night if it came to that. By the time they finished, the last light drained from the sky. "What if they bring others?" Nantan asked. "Then we'll teach 'em what it costs." The first fire sparked near the corral, a flicker that grew into a roar. Jed smelled smoke before he saw the flames. Tree grass caught fast, the wind fanning it toward the barn. He heard laughter from the trees, Brackett's men drunk on whiskey and power, thinking they'd already won. Nantan appeared beside him, her face ghosted by firelight. "They think it's over." "Let 'em believe it," Jed said. He motioned her to the cabin. "Keep low. If the signal comes, don't wait." "And you?" she asked. "I stay and finish." She didn't argue, just melted into the shadows. Jed turned to the barn. Flames licked the northern wall, dancing on the iron nails. He moved to the fuse box, wired to run along the fence posts to the barn's base. He lit a sulfur match, the wind threatening to snuff it. He cupped it, waited. Then movement. 6 figures breaking from the brush, rifles low, boots fast.
Jed touched the match to the wire. The hill answered. A thunderclap split the valley as the barn erupted in fire and debris. Men screamed, some thrown clear, others not so lucky. Horses bolted. Brackett's voice roared through the smoke, no longer smug. Jed watched, unmoving. Nantan emerged, blood on her cheek, knife in hand. "2 down by the west fence," she said. "Rest scattered." He handed her his spare rifle. "Let's end it." They vanished into the night, a rancher who'd buried his grief in dust, and a woman who refused to be forgotten. Some fights aren't about winning, they're about refusing to lose. Then came the spurs, faint at first, metal brushing rock, then louder, measured. Jed froze behind a split-rail post. This wasn't Brackett's men. They cursed and stumbled. This was something else. Nantan whispered, "Who the hell?" Jed didn't answer. He knew. 10 years back, outside Carson's Crossing, he'd seen a man ride into a crooked sheriff's camp with nothing but a rope and a tired mare, left with blood on his saddle and 4 lawmen dead. That walk, calm, rhythmic, final, echoed now. The spurs stopped. A voice cut through the smoke, clear as a bell. "Jedediah Kane." Jed stepped out. "That name's rusted. I go by Jed now." The figure emerged, long coat, dust-colored hat, rifle across his back. Caleb Brackett. You always were better at burying names than trouble. You knew I'd come. Brackett smiled. You'd turn this place into a war field. World brought war to my gate. I just answered. Brackett's gaze flicked to Nantan, her knife still red. This what you choose now? Bleedin' for ghosts? I choose not to run. Silence stretched. Brackett stepped forward. No rifles. Just you and me, Jed, like before. Jed dropped his repeater in the dirt. They stood 10 paces apart, 2 men frayed to a single thread. The wind blew ash between them. A hawk circled above, quiet witness to a world that kept trying to forget.
The shot rang out once, then silence. Brackett fell slow, eyes wide with recognition, not fear. His revolver slid from his fingers. Jed stood over him, chest heaving. You shouldn't have come. Brackett's lips moved, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer. Then he was gone. Nantan walked over, careful. You okay? Jed nodded, the kind of nod you give a grave. The fire had eaten half the corral. The barn was a black skeleton. Brackett's men scattered, their hoofbeats fading into the night. It was quiet now, too quiet, the kind that meant the fight was over, but peace was still a stranger. They buried the bodies at dawn. No markers, no prayers, just dirt and sweat. Jed kept Brackett's hat, not for sentiment, but as a reminder of what silence costs. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Nantan stood on the porch, a baby in her arms, a child who'd slept through thunder, fire, and death. She watched the sky like it owed her something. We'll head north at first light. My sister's near Red Basin. Maybe start again. You'll make it, Jed said. And you? He looked at the land, scarred, burned, but alive. I'll ride south. Mary Hendrick needs an escort. Denver trail's long. Nantan's smile was faint. The lonely man rides again. Not lonely, he said, glancing at the baby. Just unfinished. She touched his shoulder, a gesture that said more than goodbye. At dawn their paths split, one to the mountains, one to the plains. Jed rode west, hoofs soft against ash and gravel. Behind him, the wind whispered through broken fences, over blood that would fade but never be forgotten. Ahead, maybe not peace, but purpose. You ever think about what justice really means? Not the kind in books or courtrooms, but the kind you feel in your bones when the world's gone wrong. In the Wild West, it wasn't about laws or badges. It was about standing firm when silence would have been easier. Jed and Nantan, they didn't just fight for survival. They fought to remember what deserves to be remembered. The strength to say no, the courage to cut the rope, the will to keep going when the world burns down around you.
This story reminds me of something I read once about the Apache warriors. They didn't just fight for land or pride. They fought for the right to exist, to be seen. Nantan, with her scarred palm and unyielding eyes, carried that spirit. And Jed, he carried the weight of a man who'd lost everything, but found something worth fighting for again. Maybe we're not so different. Maybe there's a cold pine in all of us, a place where we decide whether to stay silent or step into the fire. If this story hit you like it hit me, stick around. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep telling the stories that matter, the ones that remind us what it means to stay human in a world that tries to make you forget. And hey, check out the video linked on your screen. It's got a twist that'll stay with you long after the credits roll. Ride safe, folks, and keep your eyes on the horizon.